Alright, hello, and welcome to the very last theory-based video in VCE economics for aggregate supply-side policies. This is lesson 6. We're going to be looking at strengths and weaknesses of aggregate supply-side policies to finish off all the content for VCE economics, which is very exciting, obviously, because it means after this you're moving on to exam revision, and then you will almost be done with VCE, and that's probably only 3 to 4 lockdowns away based on how we're currently going. Hope you're doing well. It's a Tuesday morning here. Regional Victoria has just come out of lockdown, but I'm isolating because I had to get a COVID test yesterday because I went to a tier 2 site like a sucker. Let's get into it. So the key knowledge for this is that we're going to be looking at the strengths and weaknesses of using aggregate supply side policies to achieve the Australian domestic macroeconomic goals and how these may affect living standards. It's pretty, you're used to this kind of stuff. You did this exact same thing with your aggregate demand side policies. Now you're doing it with aggregate supply. So essentially it's just like how changing the cost of production or the efficiency for businesses will affect those domestic macroeconomic goals, and then how that will impact on living standards. So to get into it, this is our lesson title. Makes me wonder if you'll get asked to discuss or evaluate question if there's strengths and weaknesses. I wonder if that's ever going to happen. So some strengths of aggregate supply side policies is that they can help fix structural problems which aggregate demand cannot address. So by doing things like improving efficiency, this helps improve productive capacity, which aggregate demand side policies do not always do. Because obviously if aggregate demand keeps increasing too much, especially if it outpaces aggregate supply, it causes other issues like demand inflation, etc. Whereas aggregate supply side policies can help create what ends up being talked about down here, non-inflationary economic growth. Because increasing efficiency decreases our cost inflation while increasing our economic growth. It can usually work in a complementary way with aggregate demand side policies, so it means as aggregate demand is increasing, aggregate supply can hopefully also increase, and therefore we are having growth without those inflationary issues. And some aggregate supply side policies can also lead to an increase in aggregate demand. So some aggregate supply side policies can then lead to an increase in employment, which then obviously means people have more income, more private consumption spending, therefore more aggregate demand. Some aggregate supply side policies might lead to more business private investment spending, which then therefore also leads to greater levels of aggregate demand. So they can help work in tandem with aggregate demand side policies really well. And so then how this kind of works, so like any policy that you're talking about, you're going to mention a policy, like if you have to tie it to strengths and weaknesses, you're going to kind of mention a policy, talk about how it impacts either the cost of production or the efficiency. And then from there, that's obviously going to increase or decrease production, which will then lead to an increase or decrease in aggregate supply. From this point, you can kind of like make assumptions about cost inflation, because obviously if costs are going down or efficiency is going up, cost inflation is going to be eased, and the opposite is true. Whereas if production increases, obviously that's going to be good for strong sustainable economic growth, and that might also lead to decreasing levels of unemployment. So things like that are really important when you're getting to linking those to the goals. Some weaknesses of aggregate supply side policies, so there can be some long implementation and impact lags. So obviously those political hurdle type things where sometimes because policies need to get voted on through both houses of parliament, it might take a long time to get in. And impact lags can reduce their short-term benefit. So a lot of aggregate supply side policies we will not feel the benefit of until long-term. So for example, investing in education. So if we invest in primary and secondary education, that might not lead to productivity benefits for over a decade. So because the people who we are trying to improve the education of won't enter the labor force until much later. So that benefit might not come for a long time, which is obviously a weakness of it. Although aggregate supply side policies increase our productive capacity, it will have no benefit unless aggregate demand also increases. So we can increase our productive capacity, we can increase production, but if there's no extra demand, so like if we implement a whole lot of technology that makes our production far more efficient and improves our productive capacity, increases our levels of GDP, if no one got employed from that and there's no extra aggregate demand, we are just going to have excess stock that is not being sold, which is obviously not great. There's also no guarantee of benefit from some aggregate supply side policies. So things like research and development might lead to no improvement. So there's a bit of risk involved. So research and development, you may spend money on research and development and time and money, and at the end of it, have no real benefit obviously can be a negative. Skilled migrants, even family migrants, may send their income or part of their income back overseas, which means it's not going to have any benefit in the Australian economy, which can be a negative there also. And that's essentially it. Like strengths and weaknesses, as with all other things, it's really important that you're able to tie them into the current economy. So skilled migration, probably not the best to tie into the current economy right now. Research and development kind of makes sense because there is a lot going in research and development at the moment. A lot of government incentives in that area. We'll get into more specifics of that in future videos. There are already some out if you look at some of the exam prep playlists. But that's essentially it for strengths and weaknesses overall. So you did it, you started out, and you finished the VC economics curriculum, which is pretty darn exciting. If you have watched all these videos throughout the year, firstly, thank you for doing that. That's a lot of time of listening to me talk. I feel a little bit bad for you. But also, I have a revision lecture coming up on September 30th of 2021. It is $20. If you go to my website, therunningeconomy.com, you can sign up for that and listen to me talk about economics for 3 hours and then ask me any questions that you might have so I can help you even more, hopefully. If you have any questions, send them to me, Sean at therunningeconomy.com, or comment them on the video. Other than that, if there's any other videos you want for exam preparation, let me know as well, and I can work on creating those before the exam in November, assuming that the world doesn't continue being on fire and things change before then. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.